Three big thoughts on the future of farming, food prices, and what is grown on America's farms. That's what we're covering in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field, then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic and short and sweet episode of The Business of Agriculture. We're talking about the future of farming, food prices, and what's growing on our farms. And I want to give you a glimpse based on a lot of thoughts. I've been on the road a lot the last 5 weeks, and I've been thinking through these things. I've been on America's Farms. I've been at field days with Extreme Ag. You know, I work for Extreme Ag. It's a bunch of forward-looking, large-scale farmers trialing the latest new technologies and practices. So I've been at all these field days working for them, recording videos. That's what I do. I also produce their Cutting the Curve podcast. More important, I've been reading a lot, and I've been bumping elbows in different circles in agriculture, as well as the guests we've had on my Business of Ag Success group, something you should consider being in. We meet every other Friday via Zoom. It's $99 a month, no subscription. Great guests, great discussions. But besides that, let's talk about where I see things going. We're going to use less of almost everything in production agriculture, and we're still going to get more. We're going to probably get away from the price idea on food, and we're going to have a big array. I'm going to get into that in big time here in a little bit. And then also what's growing on America's farm ground is going to look very different, I believe, just 10 years from now than it does right now. Those are the big teasers, if you will. All right, let's talk about the three big thoughts, or thoughts on three categories, if you will: the future of farming, food prices, and what's growing on America's farms. All right, I'm at these field days, and we're trialing all sorts of things. Reduction in nitrogen. Why? Because nitrogen is the new boogeyman. Extreme Ag guys are talking about reductions in nitrogen. Started with my friend Kelly Garrett in Iowa. I saw it with Johnny Varell down in Tennessee this week, where they used 0 pounds of nitrogen. And you're saying, Damien, that's crazy. Okay, those guys can do that, but I'm out here. I'm a farmer. I've got to make money. Get away from all that. Let's go big picture here. That's why you're listening to The Business of Agriculture, because this is not, this is not the local cooperative where you go in there and drink coffee and gossip. This is big picture stuff. Here's the deal. Nitrates are the new boogeyman. Look at what's happened in Europe in the last 2 years. You've literally got farms being nationalized, taken away under the guise of environmentalism. I believe it's much more sinister than that. I believe it's actually a land grab. I believe it's about power and control. I think it's about creating food scarcity. But never mind. That's a topic for another podcast. What I'm telling you right now is nitrogen is the new boogeyman. That's the alleged reason for all of these over-the-top environmental movements that then control agriculture. It is the new stick to beat agriculture, nitrogen. So my guys are talking about nitrogen reduction trials on corn. Going down to 0 pounds is obviously going to be a failure. But what about if you could use half as much? In the future, we are going to use way less fertility per bushel produced. We're going to use probably even less fertility per acre farmed than we do right now by sizable amounts. Why? Quite simple, we have over-fertilized. I've worked for the Mosaics. I've worked for the Nutrients. I love those companies. I love agriculture. I'm just telling you that they've done a good job of selling the fertilizer, and we've done a good job of buying it as producers because it was a cheap insurance policy. You know what? Grandpa started putting on fertilizer in the 1940s, and by golly, it gave us yields, and we've stuck with it. But we over-fertilize. We also fertilize streams, rivers, the Great Lakes. Let me tell you about the algae bloom that started becoming a big issue in Lake Erie 20 plus years ago. We're going to use less fertilizer per acre and still get bigger yields because we're going to put the fertility right where it needs to be. We're also going to get better about the uptake. We throw a whole bunch of fertility out there. I'm learning this. Remember, I wanted to be an agronomist. But the science was a little too much, so I became an agricultural economist. But you know what I can tell you? I know what they taught me about N, P, and K back in the 1980s in FFA, and I can tell you where we've come from there, where we're talking about micros and all those micronutrients from the zincs and the borons and the calciums and the coppers and all those things. Potassium helping with the uptake. I sit through these sessions. This is where I just was this month at these field days, and I'm hearing people that are much smarter than me with PhDs talking about uptake and how we're only getting about 30% of the fertility applied into the plant. And you're telling me we're not going to cut back? Vast amounts of fertilizer inputs are going to be pulled back in the next several years. First off, it's the environmental reasons I've already alluded to. Future farm bills will require this. USDA policies will require this. I'm not encouraging it. I'm just telling you what I see coming. You will, if you want to get crop insurance, you will have a fertility or a sustainability plan. You will have, just like if you're a factory and you handle hazardous materials, you have a hazardous materials handling protocol procedure and you get it approved by different government entities. That's where we're going to be on farms with all of the fertility. We're going to use less fertility per acre, and we're going to use less fertilizer per bushel produced. Good for us. Economics and environment come together. You're also going to use less seed. I remember when we went to drilled beans in like the 80s. It became the thing. Put them on 7.5 inches. You know what? And then Roundup Ready. Just go out there, throw in as many soybeans as you can, get as much of a canopy as you can, then fly over, drive over with a sprayer, spray with Roundup. Great. But here's the thing. We're spending more money on seed than we need to. No offense to the seed companies, but we know that we can actually back off on seed and we can get the same amount or greater yield. I saw a trial on skip row corn. I just started hearing about skip row corn a year ago. My buddy Matt Miles down the south said, you know something? We started doing this with cotton a long time ago. Turns out you can have less cotton per acre and let it have bigger spaces and it'll bush out, which is good because cotton's like a tree. If you put it too dense, it'll grow straight up, just like a tree planting to try and get timber to grow fast and grow straight. He says, this happened in cotton a long time ago. We reduced planting population to get a bushier cotton plant. We're going to do that on soybeans. We already are reducing populations on soybeans and getting as much yield. Now I'm seeing skip row corn where you put a little less seed, maybe the same amount, but you get bigger yield. Skip row, the idea is you're giving that plant more room for air movement. Certain geographies, this really works. Certain climatological regions, this really works. And you're moving more air through there. You're also then using potentially less seed. So I see this as a reality. Chemistry. There's no doubt we're going to use less chemistry per acre. We already are. Some of us that remember the 1970s, we were pretty unjudicious, we should say. We were pretty fling it out there. I remember the old days, the chemicals, and so do you. There's more environmental scrutiny. There's more farms being farmed with residential pressure right next to them. There's more eyeballs on us. And let's face it, we probably should do this anyhow. If we're overusing fertility and we're overusing chemistry, it's good for our pocketbook to pull back, to use less and get the same or greater yields. This is where precision farming comes in, drone technology, all the things, operations center, everything you know. So if you are in the ag retail business, let's face it, you're going to sell less seed, less fertilizer, less chemistry. There will be more biologicals. They are still unproven. That is true, but I am seeing these trials where certain biologicals can enhance a reduction in the other inputs. A utilization of biologicals can help with then the transfer of the nutrients. There will be more biologicals. There will be less biological companies because right now there's 1,200 that are in the biological space. That doesn't mean that they're all going to survive. As I tell everybody, I am from Indiana. I go to the Indianapolis 500 every year. The Indianapolis 500 first ran in 1911. It was a challenge put out to the automobile manufacturers to build a car that could travel 500 miles with few breakdowns, and the car that did it the fastest got the award for the International Sweepstakes, which is what the Indianapolis 500 was originally called. Why was it held in Indiana? Because at that time, there were more than 100 manufacturers of automobiles in my home state of Indiana. Today, there are not 100 manufacturers of automobiles in the state of Indiana. There aren't even 100 manufacturers of automobiles in the country. There are far fewer than that, as you well know. Why? Because winners and losers happen. Some of the technology did not work. Some of the things just got consolidated. Many companies went away because they couldn't keep up. Many got bought, merged, and here we are today. That's where biologicals are going to go. So I see a future of farming with definitely drastically less applied fertilizer, especially phosphorus and nitrogen. Nitrogen is the new boogeyman. Trust me. You're going to hear more and more about nitrates. There will be more biologicals, less chemistry, less seed, less fertilizer. You can trust me on that. More intensive. And also regenerative practices will meet conventional. I predicted it in my book right over here, Food Fear. I said there's a future where regenerative practices meet organic practices, meet conventional practices, and we should actually cheer that day on, because what we're talking about is stuff that's good for the farmer, good for the yield, good for the ground, and hopefully good for the bottom line. I saw no-till practices. I saw strip-till practices. We're going to till less. I hope to God we are tilling less. Good for erosion control. Good for soil health. Also, you can then apply for carbon programs and sustainability programs. Yes, you see, if we're tilling less and getting greater yields, it's good for soil health, and also we're capturing that carbon. You can get paid for it. Damian, are you one of those tree huggers? No, I'm just telling you I'm a realist. I see what's coming down the road, and I see what America's farmers need to do, and it'll be good for everybody, especially if it's good for your farm, your ground, your environment, and your bottom line. Sustainability program is now. I should probably hop in and tell you about TrueTerra. TrueTerra is one of my sponsors here. TrueTerra is focused on supporting farmers at every stage of the sustainability journey to help make, plan, and maintain regenerative management practices to help with your agronomic, your economic, and your environmental sustainability goals and endeavors. You know what? Commodity prices are low, almost below break even, possibly below break even. You know what you need? A diversified revenue stream. How do you do that? What if you signed up for a program that made you $25, $35 extra dollars per acre? Maybe that's your new margin, break even on your crops, and your margin is a sustainability program like the kind you can get from TrueTerra. Go to TrueTerraAg.com and learn more. It's part of Land O'Lakes. They've been around for more than 100 years, Land O'Lakes, so it's worth giving them a try. Okay, food prices. That's going to change. I just sat through a session with a gentleman, an economist from Rabobank, the world's largest banker, agricultural banker, I should say. And we talked about the two things that appeal most, the things that move the needle when it comes to consumers. It still comes down to taste and price. Now, we in agriculture generally have always thought it's about price. Price. Cheap food. Again, I talked about it in my book. It came out 4.5 years ago. It's still the same story today. We focus on price because we're farm people. We think everybody only cares about price, and that's not necessarily true. If that mattered, if that was the only consideration, how would there be thousands of Whole Foods outlets? Have you been to a Whole Foods? Not one thing in there wins the low price category. You could go to Dollar General and load your basket for what the average one or two items at Whole Foods is going to set you back. So don't think that every consumer is only motivated by price. Now, it is a big consideration. It's number 2 in general polling. But what I'm telling you is we have a consumer that has less children. We have a consumer that wants to have more experiences. I'm 55 years old. I am not a Gen Z, but I can tell you when I see them spending $6 on their fruit-infused iced drink that they carry around, their 60-ounce, $40 Stanley Cup or whatever the hell they cost, I can tell you that they care a lot about what makes them feel good. And expensive food makes them feel good. Food that has an environmental story makes consumers feel good. I really, truly believe that we will get through this food inflation. We will get through this inflation eventually. We do not have inflation right now due to cost of commodities. It's cost of energy. I'm talking ag commodities, not because of ag commodities. It's because of energy. It's because of labor. It is because of policy. It is because government overspend. We will eventually, hopefully, as a country, get through this. Otherwise, we look like Argentina, which is a completely different story about politics and economics we don't need to get into. But the point I'm saying here is, assuming we get through this, we have a consumer that's probably not going to have kids. They, to my friend Todd Thurman's point, they might be living at home. So if you're living at home until you're 28 and you don't have a car because you use Uber, you have discretionary funds if you work, assuming you work, where you can spend more money on food. So I think this price argument on food is very important right now when we have seen 30% run up in food prices at the grocery store. I think it's important for folks like you and me that care about poorer consumers, the blue collar family that's truly like getting squeezed right now on gas prices, housing prices, insurances have all gone up almost double in the last 4 years. and then also now goes to the grocery store and gets shellacked. But I think that we must always be paying attention to the fact that we've got a consumer who wants to pay up for something that makes them feel good. Case in point, it's not just about making you feel good from an environmental story. That's the story on organic, generally. I pay for organic because it makes me feel like I've done something better for the earth. And we all know that there's not a lot of truth to some of that, but those are marketing claims, not farming claims. And there's also this reality. Taste and price do not have to be mutually exclusive. If those are the two things that drive the consumer, and you've heard me talk, I had Kevin Folta on here and we talked about nutrient density. I had Todd Thurman on here and we talked about the reality of obesity drugs and then the consumer eating less. Now with the consumer eating less due to obesity drugs, that was a recent episode that I put out, maybe now more than ever, nutrient density and flavor and all those things matter more. If you go from 5,000 calories a day down to 2,000, you might be more discerning in the type of calories you're getting. We hope anyhow. What if taste and price are not mutually exclusive? Because we always thought, okay, for expensive stuff, it can be really, really good, but to be affordable, it may not be as good. Well, there's hope. This is from a couple weeks ago, the exchange section of the Wall Street Journal. It's about the folks over at the world's largest berry company, Driscoll's, and that berries, they have now put better tasting berries out there. And this was the header. Berries have never tasted better. Here's the juicy backstory. It's a great story about what they did at Driscoll's. Generally, as the world's largest berry producer, they've had to prioritize, like all produce companies, transportability, shelf life, and yield, right? So we got away from what the consumer might really love and instead what the consumer would accept. We've all gone to the store and bought tomatoes versus the tomatoes that my wife grows in her garden that smell really good, taste like the earth, make you go, oh my God, that's just like July and August on a plate with some cheese next to it, sprinkled with some salt and pepper. It's amazing. And then you go to the store in January and you buy tomatoes. They look good and they have the taste of water. Where I'm going with this is, what if food prices right now actually and food taste come together? In other words, there's this premium category that we think we can pay for, organic, grass-fed, whatever that thing is. But what if then it becomes, well, for really good tasting food, for really healthy food, you're going to pay up. And there's still going to be that category. But what if it's like everything? Remember, calculators used to be expensive. Now it's on your phone. What if, like everything, video games used to be tremendously expensive. Now they're on your phone. Well, no, they're not necessarily, but the simple ones are. The point I'm making is, over time, new technology, new products that are very pricey because it's new to the market or it took a lot of work to get it there, the commoditization effect kicks in and the product or the price of the product comes down. That's where I see the future of food. And we're going to keep making better food. And yeah, we'll get a premium for a while, and then eventually the premiums will come down a little bit. That's okay. Use the berry example right now. They're charging a premium for the best tasting berries you've ever had. According to the articles, they're targeting women of a certain socioeconomic strata, meaning they have a little bit of money, with children, because that's who usually buys berries. I suppose old people buy berries as well. Old people without children at home buy berries, but maybe they're more price sensitive. The point I'm making here is they've got enough of a category right now to produce really damn good tasting berries, and they're a little bit of a premium product right now, but what about when they can get the transportability, yield, and shelf life and still retain the flavor? I see a future with more flavorful food, and I'm ready for it. You've heard me talk about Mark Schatzker's books, The Dorito Effect, Steak, and then I talked about it in my own book about flavor and where I see the need for a more flavorful product versus just a commoditized bulk product, using tomatoes again as the example. That's where I see things going. All right. Where do I see things going on our cropland? Where do I see the future of farming and then food prices and how that affects the farm ground? This is based on a lot of research I've done over the years, plus my body of work and my travels. Before I tell you about that, I want to talk to you about Redox. My friends at Redox have a great product line that will enable your crops to maintain plant charge balance. They told me about this a month or so ago, and I said, wait a minute, what are you even talking about? Plant charge balance. Every plant that you put in your ground, every plant that grows, takes up nutrients, all of which have an electrical charge. So your nutrients come out of the ground, they have a negative or a positive charge. Your plant will do whatever is needed to create an even balance of these charges. If a grower's fertility program creates an uneven charge balance, the plants must work harder, which compromises yield. Redox Bionutrients combines 13 key carbon chemistries with biostimulants to achieve a plant charge balance, which is exactly what you want for less stressed plants and bigger yields. With 30 years in business, Redox has a great track record of helping growers. Find out more at redoxgrows.com. Okay, talked about where I see farming going. We talked about the products and the array of products and how we're going to use less of some of them. It's going to be because of environmental. It's going to be because of economical reasons. It's going to be a lot of stuff. We talked about where food. Along that side of tastier food and where the food and price thing, actually the inversion, if you will, where it's not just that they have to be mutually exclusive. What about the array of products? And what about the actual farms that produce them? Hear me out on this. I started telling my audiences and in speaking engagements a decade or more ago. I said, I see a future with fewer farmland acres. Some folks get really mad about this. Oh, it's because of urbanization. It's because of suburbanization. It's because of solar. Well, those are all reasons that we're going to have fewer farm acres. That's true. I think it's the Midwest. I just read an article 2 to 4 days ago. The Midwest, meaning the traditional Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan. Name 6 states. I can't give you the exact, but the point is like 1.5 million farmland acres were lost to development just in the last 21 years, I think it was. Yeah, that's a real thing. But here's why it's not as alarming as you might want it to be. We're growing more per acre than we ever have. We're amazing at productivity. Our productive capacity is unheralded, unrivaled. Should not even be questioned, frankly. We're going to continue to have this situation where acres get idled because we just don't need them. And I'm not saying that they're useless acres, and I'm not insulting anybody's farmland, but I put this on LinkedIn and people question me. If you are in a high residential area and you also are environmentally sensitive, your acres will be probably better utilized going into a conservation program or for development. This is going to happen. So what I see happening is the number of acres being idled. If you're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I spoke to the National Hay Association several years ago, and they got one cutting of Timothy hay that goes for grass hay, and it goes to the horse racing trade. And I said, I'm not being mean, but I see your farming operation either changing or going away because horse racing goes away. You know, I mean, horse tracks have closed in the last 5 to 10 years because the anti-animal abuse thing. Less horse racing. It's not as much of a sport as it was in the old days. Men don't knock off work to go and gamble on the ponies like they used to. And there's the animal rights activism. So if you grow grass hay for horses, there's going to be a challenge, especially if it's going to the horse racing community. Then there's the other reality. You get about one cutting, and the number of tons per acre is very, very light. So you're talking about not a tremendous, really productive area. So you're not talking about very much return. So if it's a $40 or $60 per acre return, you can probably match that with some kind of a conservation program. The point is, acres that were carved out of the forest or out of the high plains to grow crops might revert. And maybe they should. So we're going to see 360 million farmland acres in the United States. Very likely in the next decade, 20% of that could go away. We've got about 23 million acres in CRP right now. CRP was invented almost 40 years ago in the 1980s. The idea was to take supply off the table to then stabilize or boost crop prices. If demand stays constant and you take 23 million acres off the table, you take supply off the table, demand remaining constant, then you boost prices. The only problem is supply increased on the other non-23 million CRP acres. We will continue to have acres get idled, either through CRP or through some other program. Perhaps it's going to be private sector. Maybe it's going to be a new carbon sustainability program. We'll take these 640 acres in eastern Colorado out of production. Therefore, we don't use any water, irrigated water. And by doing so, we revert it to native species, which is good for sage grouse or some such bird program. I see these things happening, particularly in folks that are in acres that are very water dependent, especially any water that comes out of the Ogallala Aquifer, any water-intensive, irrigation-intensive acres in California where we already have so much pressure on, from an environmental standpoint on farming, there will be more acres idled in the next decade than there have been in probably the last 20 or 30 years, is my prediction. Why? Our productivity index continues to go up, and the environmental movement will clamor for this. Also, let's face it, we just don't need the crops. Especially when we talk to the major commodities, we're oversupplied on corn. 40% of it goes to ethanol. We've got a glut of soybeans. That's why they're hovering at the $10 and under range. China's going to decline as a customer from the whole world, not just from us. They're going to make up for it by grabbing beans from Brazil at first. But ultimately what happens is China just doesn't need as many soybeans because China's going to start losing population, and they're not going to continue to eat more per person. They are already eating very well. You see where I'm going with this? Global demand is not going to continue at the pace of exponential growth that it has for the last 30, 50 years. So some of the acres are going to go away. Now, there's also this thing, if you go back to my prior episodes, I did an episode with the sorghum guy, and we talked about how many acres, I think it's around 6 to 6.5 million acres that are in grain sorghum now. What if those doubled? Sorghum's very drought tolerant. Sorghum does not need the level of water that a corn does or a soybean does. So the point is, some of these acres are going to shift. I do believe, based on the other things I just told you about food price, about the growth in food experiences, I see us going back to flax, buckwheat, products derived out of sorghum. I'm not a food scientist, admittedly, but I see an opportunity here, and I think that some of it's going to be economically incentivized or environmentally mandated. In other words, do I see us growing more than 90 million acres of corn in the United States or 90 million acres of soybeans in the United States? No. I, in fact, see the number of acres devoted to those two commodities in particular declining. We didn't used to produce that many acres of them. Those two have had a growth in acres in the last, and the acreage report, by the way, is coming out here August in USDA. It's a big thing for everybody in ag. I'm just telling you that when you hear the USDA acreage report 5 years from now and 10 years from now, you will not hear that we have 93 million acres of corn and 89 million acres of soybeans or whatever that's going to be this month of August. I'm telling you, you won't hear that because those acres are going to be, some of those more difficult, more challenging acres will probably be idled or, more importantly, switched over to something that is maybe not as profitable as corn and soybeans under the current arrangement, but because of environmentalism and because of also the cost of water, which you've heard me say, water is going to become more of an economic category. Right now, water is usually more of a political category. The day is coming. Acres will shift. Acres will move. All you got to do is look back and see how many acres of both of the two big commodities we grew like 30, 40 years ago. Before the rise of China, before all the whole big push for ethanol, we didn't grow nearly as much, and that day is coming. Thanks for being here. It's all changing. I'm glad you sat here for my short and sweet episode about the 3 big thoughts on the future of farming, food prices, and what's going to be growing on America's farmland acres. So much change is coming, and I get excited about it, but I also know that you probably get a little apprehensive, as we all do. Those are my big takeaways. Those are my big thoughts from what I saw. Again, I can't emphasize enough. If you stay with me here in the business of agriculture and you love talking about what the future might hold, and you have a category you'd like for me to get a guest on, go ahead and send me a recommendation or somebody you'd like me to bring on the show. Very much appreciate you being here. Go and check out my friends at Truterra, Redox, and also Pattern Ag that sponsor this show and bring it to you. I appreciate you spending some time with me. Till next time, I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.